This week, we welcome Danny Jenkins, CEO and co-founder of ThreatLocker, to discuss the fact that misconfigurations are vulnerabilities too. In our leadership and communication segment, we'll discuss the power and folly of the word yes. And Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Ransomware, supply chain attacks, 0 days. Cyber threats don't wait, and neither should your business. With ThreatLocker, you're not just reacting to threats, you're stopping them before they start. Our Zero Trust endpoint protection locks down your environment with pinpoint control over what's allowed to run and what's not. No guesswork, no blind spots. Just proactive, built-for-now security that keeps your business moving. Want to see how a true default deny strategy works? Head over to securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker and take the first step towards shutting the door on threats before they even knock.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode 409, recorded Monday, August 18th, 2025. I'm Adrian Sanabria, standing in for Matt Alderman, and joining me today is Summer Fowler. How you doing, Summer?
Hey, good to see you, Adrian. Had a great weekend. I was in what I call my happy place this weekend in Snowshoe, West Virginia.
Nice.
I went down with my daughter and some friends. They did some mountain biking and we did some hiking, so it was great.
That sounds like a blast. I was on the other end of the temperature spectrum. I was in Miami for a week, and then I was up in a cabin in the mountains of Georgia for a week. So that was my summer vacation. Yeah, it was very nice. It looked like a Hobbit house. It's the only Airbnb I've stayed in where the roof has a sprinkler system because it's all grass covering the roof.
Wow.
They have to mow the roof as well.
That's amazing.
All right, a few announcements, and then we'll get going with the interview. You can join us at InfoSec World 2025, October 27th through 29th at Disney's Coronado Springs Resort, Lake Buena Vista, with pre-event workshops October 25th through the 26th and post-event workshops October 29th through the 30th. Connect, learn, and level up your cyber game. Save 25% now with code ISW25-SW at securityweekly.com/ISW2025. Also, you can join us on August 26th at 11 a.m. Eastern for Securing the Backbone, Strategies to Counter Cyber Threats to Critical Infrastructure in the Public Sector. That is quite a title. Hear from top experts in energy, transportation, healthcare, and more as they share real-world attacks and proven defenses. Register now for complimentary access with code CSS25-SW at securityweekly.com/CSSinfra2025. All right, jumping into the interview. This interview is sponsored by ThreatLocker, and I just happened to be wearing a ThreatLocker t-shirt today. That was complete coincidence. I actually didn't realize I was going to be interviewing Danny until a little earlier this morning. And the topic today is going to be misconfiguration, the forgotten vulnerability. Danny is the CEO and co-founder of ThreatLocker, a cybersecurity company specializing in zero trust endpoint protection solutions. Danny, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me today, Adrian.
Yeah, lovely to have you. And one of my favorite topics, both me and Summer also work for IONS. We're faculty over at IONS. And the vast majority of the chats I do is on vulnerability management. And one of the key topics is it's a lot more than just CVEs. Like there's so much more to it, so much more that'll get you in trouble. Like an open S3 bucket doesn't have a CVE is like the common thing we say. Like there's some of these extremely common things that happen in attacks that are not going to show up on your scans, or at least on your traditional like infrastructure scanner scans.
Oh, and I think that's the problem. And we really focus on this idea of zero trust. And at ThreatLocker, we also have this MDR team. And one of the problems we constantly find is we call the MDR the configuration police. Because pretty much every time they're calling someone because of the real issue, it's because somebody did something wrong. They didn't block untrusted software. Their machine was in monitor only mode. They accidentally left a port open on their firewall. It's always those things that cause the attacks to happen. So, and that's what we've been scrambling our head on 2 years. It's like, great, we put the best technology in front of people. It's pointless if it's turned off or not configured correctly.
Yeah, I actually started a consulting company back in 2017, me and a partner, and one of our services was just a monthly service, and we would just go in and check configurations, primarily of security tools, but other tools as well. And 100% of the time, we found things misconfigured. Security tools were installed, but not given a policy. Right, like just all these things where they almost got it right, like they were that close, and just didn't hit that last button, didn't take that last step.
I think that's an interesting juxtaposition because, Adrian, you're talking about, hey, I had this company where we went in once a month and looked at things. And Danny, now you have ThreatLocker, that's a company that's looking for these misconfigurations and alerting and letting folks know on that. How is ThreatLocker doing this so that it's not like a once a month look at things? Is it a continuous monitoring? Is it looking at changes? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So essentially and this actually started off because we launched this new feature. So it's a feature because we don't charge for it. And it started off as, and the product or the feature name is called DAC, Defense Against Configuration. There's an internal name, Dumbass Configurations, that we call it. But we started off with, how do we make sure our tools are configured properly? Because someone comes in and they say, hey, I want to use allow listing, I want to block all untrusted software, and then they leave the machine in monitor only, or have a permit all policy, or permit the entire Windows folder. So we started off looking at that. And then we realized that it really isn't enough. And I think one of the things that made us realize that was there was a customer, they had a Screen Connect on their machine. Someone had got into their Screen Connect account and they connected to a machine. Now, there was a problem with Screen Connect. There was the machine was locked down, so no untrusted software could run. But they got onto the machine, and in the middle of the night, they connected to the machine. No lock policy. The machine was left unlocked all night. So what we said is, look, how do we not just look at our configurations, but the entire system's configuration? So literally, and we launched it at Black Hat. And what it does is it does 170 checks the initial launch is doing per day on every single device. And it's ThreatLocker configurations, it's allow listing, it's making sure ports are closed, RDP isn't configured, or if it is configured, it's sufficiently hardened. You don't have RD web, and it's doing an external port scan on the device. 170 checks, and this is just the initial release, and it does them every day, and it updates ThreatLocker every day on all of your devices, so you can see telemetry over time. What configurations do I have wrong? But also, what compliance frameworks am I potentially violating by having these configured wrong?
So it's a once a day check. So you're going out, you're pulling it back in, and then you can say, oh, hey, this changed since yesterday.
Yeah, once a day per endpoint. So if you've got 5,000 endpoints, it's doing, there's a lot of checks happening. And it's really nice, it's really efficient, and it gives them an email report saying you have 14 critical, 3 high, 2 low, or 1 medium and 2 low configurations that you need to address.
That's great. This is something that actually we're looking at right now for my company. So this is fantastic.
And what's particularly nice is when we start looking at the stuff. I mean, the ThreatLocker stuff's easy because we know what customers do wrong all the time. We know that, hey, if I think about, we got 54,000 companies, and when you start saying, I'm going to use allow listing, I'm going to block all untrusted software, I'm going to use dynamic ACLs on my network and shut down all ports, it gets really hard for someone to get onto your system. But when you, the problem is, if we see all the time, people do dumb things like open up all ports or create you have an IT guy that didn't know how to do something, and they suddenly allowed the entire Windows folder. So that stuff was easy because we see those things we want to check from. But there's stuff outside of that. Hey, I've still got SMB version 1 enabled on my network.
Yeah.
Why? And most
that one printer.
No, I think the initial DAC reports that have gone out of like 70% of devices are still running SMB version 1.
Oh,
Wow. I hope
they're not even using that printer.
Yeah, and I think one of the things here, and some of the things you're mentioning do show up on your traditional vulnerability scans, but they show up as informational, right? They don't show up as critical, high, medium, or low. Like a lot of this stuff is just kind of like a note that's buried in the bottom of your scan where nobody ever looks. And I think one of the problems we have with a lot of security tools is they kind of bury us in busy work. And then the work really becomes how do we find the stuff that's actually important? How do we uncover that stuff? And oftentimes configuration doesn't make a lot of those lists.
And also what to do. That's the other thing that we found was really important. So if we found, for example, I have Microsoft Office macros enabled, and in the most circumstances, there's no reason to enable macros. It's not 1995. So what we'll say is, okay, you have macros, this CIS control, this NIST control, this Essential 8 control, this UK Cyber Essentials control, all recommend that you disable macros. But how can you do that? So we'll actually show you in the configuration tool. You can go into ThreatLocker and you can turn on a ThreatLocker configuration that will do that for you. That takes 2 minutes. Or you can go into Active Directory and you can create a group policy. So giving people the steps to fix that. And then also the risks associated with fixing that. Like things that might go wrong when you do this. You might have a CFO that thinks it's 1997 and still uses macros. So maybe check with your finance team, or at least let people know this is going to happen beforehand. So that's been really important to get people to actually change those configurations as well, not just know that they're there.
So Danny, as you think about this, and maybe it is still just like an EDR type solution, but there are these layered security stacks that a lot of organizations have. Hopefully most EDR, SIM, CASB. Where do you feel ThreatLocker integrates into these? Do you think that with DAC, it's a new class of tool? Is it just advancing a class of those tools? What's the vision?
So ThreatLocker is funny because we always try and not align ourselves with a category. And I remember when we started ThreatLocker, we came out with this crazy idea that we're gonna make the whole world block things by default. We're gonna bring it so it's so simple that instead of using EDR and antivirus, we're gonna block software by default. And I remember meeting investor after investor after investor saying, "You guys are as dumb as hell. You shouldn't do that. That's a crazy idea." Now today we have 54,000 companies, and they range from small businesses through MSPs right up to multinational companies, financial companies, banks, government agencies, things like that. So where we really push ourselves is this. Our priority in Zero Trust, our mission as a company, is to accelerate the development of Zero Trust technology. So least privilege, block by default, whatever name you want to give it, but essentially deny by default, allow by exception. And that's what our mission as a company is. So everything we do in that mission, and we have an EDR, and we have a web filtering solution, and we have a storage control solution, but everything we do is building upon how can we make least privilege more obtainable to everybody. And DAC is really just an extension of that. It's how do I make it more obtainable? And showing people where they're making mistakes is a very easy solution. And showing people why that's important, both from a risk point of view, but also from a compliance point of view, makes it easier for them. Because if you can go to your CFO and say, enabling macros is responsible for 35% of ransomware attacks, say, entry points in history. So we can reduce our service area by 35%, and all of these compliance requirements recommend it. It makes your job as a security admin or a CISO or a IT director much easier.
So how are you measuring the success of DAC on behalf of your customers? Like I know as a company, as ThreatLocker, it's like, look, get this feature out there. What if you're telling your customers, how should they be measuring the success of DAC, the feature?
So there's a line on the page that goes down, hopefully goes down every day, and how many failures you have. And we call them failures and criticality of failures. And I think for us, success is that score going down, that baseline going or up, whichever way. So better, I suppose, is but if we can see less failures every single day on every single endpoint, that's a success. And we released this in public beta a few weeks ago, and we can already see those customers getting better and better every single day. And some of them, they went in, and what you tend to see is they go in and 50% of them get solved instantly. So you go, boom, an immediate success, 50% resolution. Then after that, it starts to slow down because then they start having to ask people, can I do this?
Yeah. Yeah.
So a question about the scope of the tool. Is this limited to endpoints? Is it laptops, desktops, and servers? Does it extend to cloud? What is the scope of DAC?
So the first version of it is endpoints, laptops, desktop servers, Macs, Windows, PCs, Linux boxes. That's the first release of it. The second release is going to go into the cloud, into Office 365, into Microsoft Azure, because we're seeing just as many configuration issues there as we are on the endpoint. So going into those tools and making sure you have the proper settings set. Microsoft 365 has been terrible at default values.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
So some of their own breaches that they've had have been a result of their own defaults. They've been a victim of their own default configurations in some cases.
But what's particularly nice is we get to see the data surrounding the tenant. So if you look at an endpoint, we can say you have no policy blocking USB drives. But we know you use USB drives all the time. However, you only use 5 USB drives. So we can actually give you a recommended policy that says, limit USB drives to these 5. Your users aren't going to get upset. That's going to be a good win. With Office, we can say, or Microsoft 365, we can say, you don't have a policy that limits your login geographically, but you only have a login inside the United States because we can see those logs. So go and create a policy that logs you in the United States only. That reduces your footprint and your surface area of attack massively, doesn't cost you anything, no negative user experience. So we can combine the data to give really good recommendations of easy wins, and then there's harder wins. Like you don't block unencrypted USB drives, maybe you should, and you're using them.
Yeah. So in addition to, I was reading up on DAC, I was also reading up on your impossible travel insights, which looks like that's a really recent introduction as well. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so essentially we have integrations into Microsoft 365 right now that allow us to feed data into our XDR, if you like, and send it to MDR and respond to alerts. And one of the challenges people often have is you have to have a P2 or P3 license to get Microsoft's advanced algorithms to say you have impossible travel. It's also really, really bad because I was in Dublin a few weeks ago on my US phone, and Verizon was reporting my IP address as Florida. I then got onto a US plane and immediately flicked to the US. So I tripped impossible travel with Microsoft. With ThreatLocker, we said, okay, we need to figure out what is impossible travel. But because we have an agent on the phone and on the laptops, we also know what is your real IP address. So we can cross-reference that data and we can say, this says it's impossible. We know Danny's phone is on Verizon in Dublin because we can see it's in Dublin on Verizon, and it's just switched to a US plane network. And that's the kind of things we can do in impossible travel that is beyond just, hey, it's impossible to travel from Dublin to the US in 2 minutes.
Yeah, it's taking that data and turning it into information that it correlates. That's great.
Yeah, I imagine somebody using a VPN could be a bit of a challenge for just a very vanilla impossible travel control as well.
Yeah, and VPNs are an issue, especially VPNs that have split tunneling, so they'll have one IP for one host and another for another host. VPNs tend to be an issue, and you can learn this is normal behavior. This is a normal network the user's attaching to, but it's really hard when you're switching from location to location, or you're in a country and your cell phone says you're in the US, and it seems to be completely scrambled. Like if you are using Vodafone in Europe and you go from Vodafone Italy to Vodafone Ireland, it will say you're in Italy still. If you're using Verizon in the US, you go to Ireland, it will say you're in Florida, but if you go to Colorado, it'll say you're in Colorado. So that makes it really hard to build these algorithms. But knowing the user's devices and being able to track those has allowed a lot of advancement on detecting unusual algorithms, which means less false positives, less noise for the analysts, and better user experience, but also hardening the device even more.
I love this focus on misconfigurations and things like impossible travel, credential theft, potentially. How do you and your team prioritize which innovations that you're going to build next? And what areas of the threat landscape do you see are really urgent for us as a community to tackle in the next couple of years?
So we always prioritize the problems that aren't being solved by everybody else. And I say that, so if we think about when we started off saying we need an allow listing solution that's really, really easy to deploy and really easy to manage. And nobody else was doing that. There was some allow listing solutions that was very hard. We need to figure out how we make this viable for the entire world. And we think about our patch management. So we created a patch management solution, but there's 100 patch management solutions out there. None of them are dealing with portable apps in your downloads folder. So there were so many vulnerabilities of people running out-of-date versions of putty in their downloads folder that nobody even knew existed. We could see this. So we prioritized patch
I was that
management.
employee.
And we prioritize it on the hash of the file rather than the registry key in the registry saying it's out of date. So these are the things we prioritize. Is not now the smart play would probably be as a business owner is to say, I'm going to prioritize what everyone's buying, but what we'd rather do is prioritize what's broken. And then we can expand into, okay, so we did patch management and we did it for all applications. We did it on hash, but we didn't focus on operating systems because there's loads of systems. Now we're adding operating systems because people are saying, well, I don't want two systems. But our priority was one, secure the gap, and then we'll expand out to what everyone else is doing.
Well, I think that's interesting from the strategic perspective of somebody who's a security leader as well, because, if you talk to like an analyst firm or something like that, the gap analysis tends to be around what the market looks like, right? Rather than, what the some of these compliance frameworks tell you should be focused on. And they all talk about misconfigurations. Right? Like they all have that focus on it. But, I feel like if you just look at what the market is eager to sell you and what everybody else is installing, there's some big gaps.
Well, and the problem is with configurations, it's very hard to, and we don't make money. I know we bundle it into our product and say it's free, but it's very hard to make money. So a lot of products are saying, well, how can I build something that telling someone to configure to configure their environment correctly is right, which is why the market doesn't tend to drive these. However, I do think as a good security company that delivers outcomes as opposed to tries to align up to a magic quadrant somewhere, you win at the end of the day. And that's, and I think I go back to when we started and every investor told us we should pivot and become an EDR. And yes, we have an EDR now, but we only added that when everything else was there. And 98% of our revenue comes from blocking software by default, ring fencing applications. Again, a perfect example. Nothing else was doing that on the market. How can Office talk to PowerShell in every single deployment in the world without any consequences? And we said, this is so simple. Let's just create ring fencing to block application to application communication where it's not required.
Well, it seems like that approach is really working. I mean, you're on the Inc. 5000 list, right, as one of the fastest growing privately held companies. And so can you talk a little bit about what are your the key leadership and cultural principles that are in ThreatLocker that allow you to do this? Like, what are the things that you're doing to attract talent, retain talent, and compete with other firms?
So it's a good question too, because Danny, you just said earlier, like the advice you were getting was, this is a really dumb idea, right? Clearly not.
And it's hard. So it's hard to sell to people that aren't looking for a product you're selling. So 90% of our sales come through education, not through people searching for what we're selling. When it comes to talent, it's the same principle where people are coming out of college learning to run a SIM or use a SIM, run a SOC. That's what they go to college for. So we've now got to take security people and say, that's not how you secure things. You secure things by hardening the environment, locking it down. I think when we think about culture, we're changing the world, and we try and make every employee understand that what we're doing is we're changing the world. But that's also really, really hard. If you want to go in and tell someone to do something a completely different way, it's not like going in and saying, here, I've got a better mousetrap. You're going in and go say, I've got a better way to get rid of mice, and that rather than trap them. And that's kind of what we're trying to build here. And it's also, there's a few things we say to every employee that starts in ThreatLocker. First thing first, it's going to be the hardest job you're ever going to do. And if anyone told you anything other than that in the interview process, you should quit now because they lied to you, and it is going to be the hardest. But also, it's going to be the most rewarding job you're ever going to have, because you're gonna solve problems that nobody else has ever solved. And as a company, we have really, really high standards. And for example, we have an average response time of 23 seconds on support from our Orlando office, 365 days a year. Our MDR is like sub-minute for them to start reviewing things. It's really, and I try and drill into everyone. You're not supporting a piece of software. You're supporting a hospital, an airport, a bank. It matters. And I think that's one of the things that we do. The other thing is we have a policy that managers are there to move obstacles. I have my phone on 365 days a year. Any employee can call me at 2 a.m. because they've got a customer problem. And they do sometimes, saying, I've got a customer in Australia, they've got a problem, I can't get to the bottom of it, I don't know who else to call. And people will call me and we'll get to the bottom of it. And I think everyone on the team needs to know that leadership is going to be there when they need us to be there. And I think that's really important to grow a team of people who want, because if you're not willing to get up at 2 a.m, how can you expect somebody else to? And I think that's the culture we try and breed. It's also a really hard job. I mean, we make that clear to everyone from day one.
But it sounds like fun too, because you're solving more problems, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the sell. I mean, we have to keep the spirits up and the fun in this business, or else you see that burnout. So I think that's great, and that type of leadership culture is really awesome.
Yeah. It's tough, but I think the people we have here, the team we've built, is unbelievable. And, I've sat up for 30 hours with salespeople at trade shows, all the way from Saudi Arabia to Las Vegas on this single trip, like 5 trade shows. I've been up in the middle of the night with our infrastructure team where they've been trying to make server performance issues go away. And everyone wants to do it. No one's saying, I got to go home. They're saying that we got to solve these problems.
Yeah.
Love it. Good stuff. Yeah, Danny, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly today. This has been great.
Adrian. Thank you, Summer.
Thanks, Danny.
All right. Make sure you visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker to learn more, and stay tuned. When we come back, we've got this week's leadership and communications articles to discuss.
Security Weekly and Cyber Risk TV are headed back to one of the biggest identity security events of the year, Octane 2025, put on by Okta. Live September 24th through the 26th, from the vibrant city of Las Vegas, Octane 2025 brings together the best minds in identity, security, and technology innovation. And this year, we're turning up the volume. Security Weekly will be on site in full force, with Mandy Logan and Adrian Sanabria leading the charge. Get ready for live stream executive interviews, exclusive on-site editorial coverage from SC Media, and brand new this year, a live stream episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. It's your chance to engage with identity leaders, dive into the future of AI security, and hang out with your favorite Security Weekly hosts. And here's the best part. Security Weekly listeners get an exclusive discount. Just head to securityweekly.com/Octane, register, and use promo code O Oscar, K Kilo, T Tango, N November, S Sierra, C Charlie, M Mike, A Alpha 25 to get your conference pass for $200.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. Now for this week's leadership and communications articles. You can check out securityweekly.com/BSW409 if you want to follow along as we go through the news, or for links to the articles that we're covering. This first one made me laugh a little bit.
Sure, yeah.
Lessons from a Coldplay concert. Yes, that Coldplay concert.
Well, what an event, right? I mean, it's interesting. It's like it burned hot, and then it's kind of died down because I think people realize
somebody made a video game based on it.
Oh my gosh!
Where you had binoculars and you're looking through the crowd and you're looking for that CEO and the head of HR of all positions. Right. Like why? of all positions. And this article talks about what is the board's role in this, right? And what should the board be doing? And, quite frankly, I think that it's
It's twofold, right? It's setting that governance structure of what the rules should be, or approving it, because the board's going to be looking at what the management decides or the executive team decides as the policies for the organization, and then reviewing them, and making sure that they make sense as the company grows, and continues to evolve. Because sometimes you set something, and then a couple years down the road, the policies don't actually make sense anymore. I'll give an example of that. We had, a policy where you couldn't have a relative working in any format of a tree underneath of someone, right? So if you're a director, nowhere in your line of management could someone work. Well, a nephew of someone who is, on our C-suite level was hired without any sort of even, referral or anything, and was layers deep in the org. And it just didn't make sense to have that policy written the way it was anymore. So we had to revisit it. So my takeaway from this is absolutely you need to have the governance in place. You also need to maintain it. And it certainly has to be trained and enforced.
Yeah, and training was the bit I wanted to bring up here. I feel like once you become the CEO or a highly visible executive of a large corporate
Yeah.
company, you can't use social media the same way, right?
Right.
Like you can't go out in public and do things the same way. Like you have to start thinking about things like this. And it's funny because I often say, I think one of the big misconceptions in cybersecurity is that cybersecurity is the most important thing, right?
Yeah.
And there's just all these examples of where a CEO's poor judgment can be, put a company in far worse place than any breach that I've seen.
Absolutely. And it could even be somewhat unintentional, right?
Right.
That the CEO has done this. When this Coldplay thing was going down, and I was talking to my friends, and there were all those rumors going around, and the fake news that the CEO was going to sue Coldplay or said that his privacy had been violated. And later we found out that that wasn't really from the CEO. But the message in that was, once you reach a certain level or once you have a certain role, you really do relinquish that right to think about outside of your home, that privacy. And that's tough. I mean, but it really, it's a responsibility that comes with certain roles. And I do think that's why it's important for boards as they're hiring and evaluating, CEOs, that this is something that they consider, and that CEOs, when they are hiring, they need to really understand the identity of the company, what they want the culture to be, and then you have to live it out. You can't say that you're going to be a culture that really cares about employees if you allow a vice president somewhere to, be retaliatory. Or if you allow someone just because maybe they're a really awesome producer in their area, they're like the best salesperson. And that's something that I think is also important, that, this CEO, this Coldplay situation, the CEO could have said any sort of values, but clearly wasn't living out what the company wanted him to.
And I think the final piece here, the final bullet point in the article is talking about preparation. And I think any company can have pretty much any, embarrassing moment from an executive or breach. And a lot of how that company or that individual will be judged is how they handle it.
Yeah.
Right. And you can often tell when a company is well prepared for something and handles it well. There's a lot of transparency. There's a proper apology, right? There's commitments to make changes and do better and things like that. And to me, it seems so easy to have that plan. There's so many good examples out there of how to do it
Yeah.
properly. And sure enough, it's, next week, it's left the news cycle.
Yeah.
But you still see so many companies that, because they handle it badly, instead of leaving the news cycle in 3 days, it just kind of perpetuates itself because they
Yes.
continue making mistakes after
Yes.
that initial gaffe.
If we look at this in the cybersecurity sense, I always say, I don't ever judge a company based on the cyber incident that's happened. I more judge them on how they respond and
Yeah.
communicate about it. And I think this was an example of that. Now, fortunately, the company had Gwyneth Paltrow who could step in and make a video for them, which was, hilarious. And I think it said a lot about the culture of the company, which was great. But you're exactly right. It's that preparation that matters.
Yeah. So yeah, it's the next story here. I'm not as good with the segues as Matt is. Matt
Matt's a
has these,
genius at them, right?
and it's probably set up for some really good segues. He just didn't share his magic with me and how he intended to do that. But this seems somewhat related to the last one in that there are some high level blind spots potentially there for cybersecurity. And and yeah, this first one, the first thing that occurred to me was this T dating app. I don't know if you guys discussed this at all.
No.
But the issues that they had, like, again, one of the things I harp on a lot is, look, we know cybersecurity isn't the most important thing to most companies, but it might be the most important thing to some of them, right?
Yeah.
And you really have to nail that. You have to judge that. And like with this dating app, you're going to say, here's a safe place to talk, details about people in your life who may wish you harm. Like, boy, you better protect those chats really, really, really well, right? For somebody else, if I'm selling you mobile data or something like that, maybe less so. I don't know, but yeah, this first one here. Back when I was pen testing first full time, there was a point in time where we'd say, yeah, you're not a target of a state-sponsored actor or anybody advanced or sophisticated. Back in 2010, I would tell people, look, you're not that important, right?
Yeah.
And today, my advice on that would be totally flipped. It would be, do you have money in the bank?
Right.
If yes, you're a target.
Well, are you on the internet? It might not even be, do you have money? It might just be, do you have a presence that someone can reach?
Yeah.
And you take this back to what Danny Jenkins was saying with the ThreatLocker side of things. It's not just, it's the misconfigurations are happening all the time. And now we have bots that are scanning for them. Mm-hmm. So everyone is at risk. And I do think if we think about these blind spots, it is one of them. It's saying, hey, we're not that big. We're not that important. It's not something that we need to think about. And so I absolutely agree that. I also think something that was alluded to in this article is not knowing what your risks are, like not understanding the CEO having a blind spot and not understanding the cyber risks. I also think that even if you can get the group to agree, like your executive team to agree that these are the risks, it's having the group, come to some sort of agreement that what you want to do next about them is the right step. So assessing the risks, what to do about them, and getting concurrence or whatever your governance structure is, but having people understand that's why, you're taking the path that you're taking and the roadmap that you're driving on.
Yeah. And being on the same page there, it seems like it would alleviate a lot of the finger pointing and other issues that you see in some organizations. Did any of these others jump out at you?
I thought the quiet, being safe, that's something else to think about.
Yeah.
Sometimes if things are too quiet, it means that it's not good. It's like having toddlers in the house.
Yeah.
It was a real lesson for us that when things were quiet, that's when the worst things in the world were happening, that you walked in and your 3-year-old had covered your 1-year-old in diaper cream and baby oil, which happened. And so, there's like a whole body paint going on. And so you think that it's quiet, and that can be the same thing. Sometimes seeing the noise and catching the noise means that you're doing the right things. And so CEOs, if you're listening out there, don't mistake quiet for safe, and don't mistake noisy and lots of information for bad.
Yeah, the one time the 3-year-old had crawled out on the roof.
Oh my gosh.
Lifted up both the window and the screen and crawled out on the roof. Yeah, was able to catch that because it got too quiet, and I went to investigate.
Yep, exactly.
All right, moving into cybersecurity metrics and CISO strategies. Um, yeah, this one, I want to make time for some of these others here. So if you have any thoughts on this one, we'll probably
I
go through
really
this one
like
pretty
this
quick.
article. I love metrics. I think that it's a fun thing to go through. I do think that this EY article gives you some really good questions just right at the top with the board perspective. There are 6 questions that I thought were really insightful. So if you're sitting on a board or if you're reporting to a board, it's really great. The thing that I really took away from this one is also not just having an understanding of these things and these questions, but also how prepared are we to address them? Right. So let's say, the second question was how much operational downtime can we endure before there's significant impact? Well, based on that in our threat profile, how prepared are we? What do we think we would be able to do? And so I do think even after, like I mentioned, after you get to, hey, these are our risks and these are the things, the next step is going to be, what are we going to do about it? How can we handle it as a team? How prepared are we? But otherwise, I liked this article a lot, and I thought it gave some really good questions for boards and for CISOs to answer.
Yeah, one thing I've seen debated a bit is avoiding technical jargon. Because in a lot of cases, I've seen people argue that you should call the thing what the thing is called
Uh-huh.
in that industry. Like, the financial folks don't avoid, SEC terminology or anything like that when they're talking to the board. So,
Yeah.
why should you with cybersecurity? But generally, it seems like the guidance is keep it high level. Make sure it what you're talking about makes sense to be talking about to this to this audience.
Well, and I think that really transitions into the next article because what you're pointing at here dives into what I loved about the next article is the CISO mindset shift. Language matters. Now, does that
Mhm.
mean never use technical terms? I don't think so. I think that there are times when it is time to educate and use those. But a couple of key things that I loved about this: stop saying phishing and start talking about trust breakdowns or start talking
Mhm.
about it in the format of what the impact could be. Stop talking about audit results and start talking, even though you have to at some points, but talk about how you're building in security by design. Now, those 2 examples might not be the greatest examples or easy things to do, but I do think that it's the language that we're using in the room as the cyber executive or the executive who leads cyber. Put that executive first and start really using the language of what's going to resonate. It can be technical. It just has to play into the impact, not the means to the impact.
Yeah, I was kind of on the fence with this one with some of the stuff. It feels like maybe the entire thing is AI generated. Anytime I see so
You're
many
playing the role of
emojis,
Jason now. It does look like it.
yeah, am I?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Jason would
it's
have probably run it through a model and had it tell us if this was AI generated.
oh, Woody.
Oh yeah, and you know what?
Yeah.
This one probably is. I think this is probably it's a Medium article. It probably was at least portions
Mhm.
of it were generated. It has the little icons like some of the tools give. So yeah, there are some things. It's just I thought the nugget was about that language.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that there aren't things worth discussing in here. I just this day and age, like you see so much of this stuff now, it's kind of off-putting to me. Like
Yeah.
the moment I started seeing all these emojis, like if it were me, I would have just skipped the article altogether. But
Well, let's
but
skip over it. Let's go to the next one.
yeah, it's yeah. So jumping over to human error in cybersecurity, this is I think a really interesting one. I definitely twitch every time I hear somebody. There are a lot of common phrases in cybersecurity that make me cringe, and humans are the weakest link is one of those.
Yeah.
because it's, I feel like all businesses have humans, right? So if you haven't built your systems for human use or with humans in mind, then I don't think they're the weakest link. I think whoever forgot to build for humans is perhaps the weakest link there, right?
Yeah.
We're never going to be able to train everyone, to be a security ninja, right? And that
Right.
shouldn't even be the goal.
I mean, here's another thing when you think about it. Think how many times you've been frustrated when Excel does something wrong because, it has a little error, it changes something. It's not that we say, wow, humans are the worst calculators or the worst converters because there was a failure here,
Right.
but there are failures in systems all the time. And we're like, well, the human's the weak link in that.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, we're also in a world where we are lauding and holding up and trying to sell everything that is artificial intelligence and moving us forward. And we're still going to blame humans when they can't keep up with all of that. And it's like,
Right.
you just can't, right? I mean, it's like asking a human being to race a car and be upset when the human isn't as fast.
Right. And it's kind of pointless, right? Like what are you going to remove the human? Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
like
yeah.
maybe with AI agents, and then we'll blame the AI agents for being the weakest link. But the humans are the link, right? They're
Yeah.
not the strongest or the weakest. They necessarily link our systems together, and we've got to account for that.
And it
And
doesn't mean they don't have to be responsible and don't have to be good stewards of the security programs. One of the things that, my cyber team has put together is the concept of we're going to train people, we're going to exercise them, and we're going to reinforce it. And
Mhm.
frankly, if you're not doing that, and I get lots of questions through IONS, Adrian, like, how do I make my training programs more user friendly, or how do I seem more like a partner and not someone who's testing all the time? Well, it's like any other team that you have, whether it's a sports team or a band or whatever. You train, so you figure out how to do the game or play the instrument. You exercise, so you practice, you put them through something, and then you reinforce it. You say, hey, this
Mhm.
wasn't exactly right. That pitch was off here, or your pace was too fast, or you ran the wrong route, right? And we reinforce those things. And so I think that's the if we move into the train, exercise, reinforce with cyber as well, along with giving them all the tools, right? You don't expect a sports team to work without equipment. And it's got, the better the equipment, the better you are. You don't expect a band to
Yeah.
work without their instruments. We've got to give people the instruments as well.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things, using your sports analogy, that I feel like we don't do enough of is giving those opportunities to fail. Like, that's why you practice, right?
Yeah.
So that you can spot those failures and say, yeah, that's not the way to do it. Try this instead. And talking about equipment, I think also works in this analogy where, okay, people are bad at creating good passwords. So let's take them out of the loop, right? Teach them to use
Yes.
auto-generate passwords and use a password manager. Like it's
Or enforce it.
honestly
Don't even just
right.
teach them
Don't
how
even
and
give the
say do
option.
it.
Yeah.
Don't give an option.
Yeah.
Because then you're eliminating that entire side of things. Don't give the option to push a multi-factor so that you can be, MFA bombed. Take those options away. Now, it sounds easy from here, the ivory tower we're talking in, until you have an
Yeah.
engineer that's like, oh my God, I'm not going to put a code in every, 87 times a day. But you got to work around that, and you've got to work with people. The majority of the company can probably still handle something different. So
Well,
yeah, you're
when
exactly
when a
right.
t- when a tool's pasting in the code for me, I don't care how many times it happens a day.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So this next one, this was news to me. I had not heard of this improv. I was not a theater kid. I was a band kid in high school. So
Yeah.
I've not heard of the yes and improv theater technique, which is kind of the crux of this whole Harvard business post here. And Yeah. So are you familiar with this?
Yes. So this is one of those things where, in cybersecurity, everybody was saying we're the office of no, just like they said that about legal
Right.
departments. And so we shifted our language from no, I can't do that, to yes and or yes but. Right? Yes, we can do that, but this is the cost that it's going to take. Or yes, and we're also going to have to add that additional protection to it. I can see where this is discussing that things can backfire. For the leaders that are listening, one of the things through my leadership training over the past year and a half that my company has reinforced is shifting even to, rather than answering, lead by coaching and lead by asking questions. So when the team says we need to do XYZ, we have to be able to do XYZ, instead of saying yes and or no you can't, ask questions. Okay, let's decompose that. Why do you need to do this? What does it support? Really dig into it with them so it doesn't even become a yes or a no. It becomes more open-ended questions where you actually resolve the issue. And I kind of felt like that's the crux of where this was going. That instead of just having yes and no, let's open it up.
Yeah, I thought it was really well written because I didn't understand it at all, and by the end of it, I got it. Right?
Yeah.
It's one of the mistakes they say. So when you're using yes and, you're using it to tell somebody that their input has been heard and you acknowledge it. So yes is not the opposite of no in the way that this is being used here.
Right.
It does not convey agreement with the idea necessarily. It's a method to keep the conversation rolling, to keep momentum going in it, which is not something you want to do in all conversations. Which
Right.
is one of the things the article outlines here is, if you need to come to a quick decision, that's not something you necessarily want to do.
And the other thing that I've learned in working with engineers my entire career is there are a lot of ones and zeros people, right? That look at a yes or a no as a one or a zero. And so being very careful not to lead with yes or no, because they'll think, well, the answer is yes and we're moving on. I can do this. When you're like you're saying, this isn't yes, the opposite of no. This is, I'm hearing you. Now I need to understand a little bit more, or we need to solve it a different
Yeah.
way. And so I do agree, especially in some of these engineering, comp sci, AI realms, avoiding the one and the zero is to your benefit.
Yes, and this article gives you some alternatives where you don't have to just use that phrase. You can say, "Could you walk me through your thinking? What
Yes.
problem does it solve for us?" I feel like those recommendations there, that's under mistake number 3 in the article, are particularly good for engineers, right? Who hear language differently, who think differently, and will process that differently.
Yeah. And more that, when you read this, you think it's about how to lead and manage people is really a matter of understanding the challenge and helping them come to the solution that's going to work for the organization.
Well, Summer, thank you so much for joining me today. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you got to jump in, and how serendipitous you were wearing the ThreatLocker t-shirt.
Yes,
Now I'm going to
indeed.
start now waking up and wearing the t-shirt of who I want to talk to that day, and maybe it'll work.
Use it to summon someone.
Yes, that's right. Manifesting the discussion I want to have.
Well, I am hosting at least one other of these. I forget if it's just next week or not. So I might see you again soon.
Excellent. Well, it's been lovely, and I'll talk to you soon, Adrian.
Big thanks also to everyone watching or listening to this week's episode of Business Security Weekly. I might see you next week, maybe not. I forget which week it is, but thanks for listening.